Hello. Hello. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Testers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. We talked about that a lot last week. I'm putting a big clock up on my second desktop monitor because even with that, I tend not to manage my time well, but without it, it's a lot worse. Welcome. This is the This Is Not Therapy Hour. It's just an open conversation, similar to kind of open office hours, I assume, like professors have. I've never been a professor, so I don't totally know, but seems right. Seems like the right kind of concept. It's just a conversation, Q&A, fine, or whatever. It's just we're talking about things. And I always pick something to talk about to start us off, because otherwise it's just weird to sit here silently until somebody says something in the chat. But thank you all for being here. And thank you, especially those of you who do enter the chat and put comments out there. Like any conversation, we shape each other. The things that I say, prompt responses from you. The things that you say, prompt responses from me, whether they're questions or comments or whatever. And we do not have to stay on the topic that I started us on. We can go anywhere. Please take me where you need to go, because otherwise it's just me rambling, which, is fun in its own way. But I'm not generally, I like to feel as though what I'm doing is potentially helpful to people, valuable to people. That's what makes me feel like it's worth doing. So that's more helpful if people are actually saying stuff. Otherwise, I'm talking into the void, and I still hope it's helpful. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're talking in the chat, it'll be your Google account name that you're signed in with. If you're watching it on Twitch, it'll be your Twitch name. And if you're watching it on Facebook, it'll be your Facebook account. Keep that in mind. I try not to ever read off people's names from the chat if I can avoid it, if I can remember, in case you're putting something out there that you don't want read out, but it is visible and recorded. So keep that in mind if there's something you wanted to put out there but we're uncomfortable having associated with some account or other that you use. I think that's about. I run a practice, a therapy and executive functioning coaching practice called Effective Artistry. That's our logo up there in the corner. EffectiveArtistry.com is our website. We have therapists and we have executive functioning coaches. I just want to clarify, when I say therapy and executive functioning coaching, I mean there are two different services that we offer, not that we have a bunch of coaches that do therapy or therapists that do coaching. All right. I think that's the main stuff. So I'll just start talking. I was hoping today, so just last night I did a presentation on anxiety, and it was very well attended. Lots of people and lots of questions, and I stayed an extra half hour to answer things, and we still had a ton of extra questions left over. I was hoping to be able to address those on the stream here, to record it and be able to send it to people, but I didn't get those questions in time. So that might be next week, next Wednesday. Just put that on your calendar, I suppose, that we'll likely be talking about anxiety, and specifically how being different from the norm in various ways impacts that anxiety, and what you can do to either cope with it when you're feeling anxious, get out of it, or what can you do to prevent it so that it doesn't happen as frequently, or that if it does happen, it's not going to be as bad. So I'm not going to talk about anxiety today, because I'm going to save that for next week when we have the questions. Instead, today I wanted to talk about brain fog. It's come up a lot recently, and several people that I've been talking to recently, if they were watching this, would be, oh, is he talking about me? Because I have talked with a lot of people about brain fog. All of you just know I've talked to a lot of people about brain fog. It's happening to a lot of people. There are other terms for it. Brain fog is probably the most common one, but people will talk about feeling fuzzy or blurry, or my thoughts are racing and I'm thinking so many things, but I can't find the right words to share it. Or people will talk about feeling less capable, feeling stupider than they normally are, feeling slower, feeling as though they can't find their words. Essentially, it's an experience that happens in cognition. It's not necessarily something that you can see. There are there are behaviors or things that happen, things that you do that you could attribute to brain fog. Oh, I did that because I'm feeling foggy. But it is something that you have to monitor yourself. That's why it is difficult to define. Same thing with anxiety, actually, like I was talking about last night. Anything where you have to pay attention to it, you have to notice it internally. It's still an observation. It's valid. It's real. We're not talking about, empiricism where it's got to be something we can all observe. But you do have to observe it. It's just that you can only observe it internally where you don't necessarily have language for it. So I guess actually really saying that, that's applicable to imposter syndrome that we were talking about. Is anything that is describing an internal experience is going to be a harder thing to define and share language about. That's one of the reasons that I put so much effort into being clear and specific. And sometimes it's difficult, like in this case, brain fog. But more or less, it is a cognitive experience of feeling as though you are not thinking as well as you could, normally would, want to be. You feel as though your cognition is not working as well as it normally does. That's brain fog. If we have any questions about that, please clarify, ask what you need. Because all of these things have tons of different terms, right? Yeah, I'll leave that there. I was going to go into more things about like imposter syndrome and whatever. Really, for the most part, the things that we talk about are universal experiences. Everybody experiences them at some times, to some extent, in some way. But that doesn't mean that it's the same for everybody. The frequency with which you experience it, how often you experience it, changes. The intensity of the experience, how strong is that sense, that feeling, whatever, it changes from person to person and context to context. The duration, when it happens, when you're experiencing it, how long it lasts, varies from person to person and context to context. And most importantly, the impact changes, meaning that two different people might both have, same frequency, duration, intensity, they're having, hypothetically, it's not really possible to have exactly, the same experience, but two different people could theoretically have the exact same experience internally, but one of them is relaxing on the couch at home and one of them is trying to perform open heart surgery. The impact of that experience is different. And some impacts are really terrible and some are even enjoyable or not a problem. I mean, it depends on a lot. So we're always trying to ride that line of normalizing without minimizing, meaning, yes, you're different. Everybody is different and you're different in the specific ways that you know yourself to be different. And you're not so different that you're not a human, because there's a lot of comfort to be found in recognizing and observing and tracking the ways in which you are different. But sometimes if we go too far in that, it becomes very distressing. We become too focused on the fact that we're different and to the point where we think we're different in some fundamental way that makes us less human. You're a special snowflake, but you're also a snowflake. That's a really nice way to say it. Yeah, I like that. So brain fog means different things to different people. Ask questions, clarify if you need to, but it is an experience of feeling as though your cognition is not working the way it's supposed to be working in some kind of detrimental way. Today, I'm just going to be presenting like a theory of mine, and this really is just something that I was struggling with a lot of brain fog. Probably, what was that? That would have been end of 2020. Something like August, September through December of 2020. Is it brain fog if my brain lives like that? That is a good question. Yes, it can be, because the only distinguishing factor of brain fog, and of course we said all those other terms, but we're going to focus on brain fog. Otherwise, we're just going to have to use 8 million different words and get confusing. Is it brain fog? And I'm assuming that there's some humor involved there. But theoretically, if it was always like that, then yes. Because the thing that makes it brain fog is your experience of feeling as though your cognition isn't working the way that it is supposed to be working. So even if you were feeling that way constantly because you're comparing, I like brain fog, it's evocative. It is evocative. And when people come up with their own terminology for it, it often does kind of land in that, obscured vision kind of category, blurry, fuzzy. It's hard to see, find, whatever things. Yeah, maybe you feel as though your cognition, a slightly sarcastic font. I tell my wife actually that everything that I ever say is always at least 1% joke. I don't know that I've ever said anything that wasn't at least a little bit of like, I don't super seriously believe this. And of course, even that is a joke. Like, to some extent, there are things that I say that aren't jokes. I'm very serious, but actually, honestly, it's much like, well, sarcasm is a specific thing, but satire is like this as well. I think it's a bit of reality testing. I have an idea that seems intriguing to me, but also maybe ridiculous. So I need to put it out there and do some reality checking and think, what is somebody else going to respond to this? But in order to make it safe for me to do that, because I'm aware it might be ridiculous and they might respond as though it's ridiculous, I need to state it in a way that if they think it's ridiculous, I can say, yep, it is ridiculous. I agree. And if they think, no, there's a lot of value in that, I say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I like that last comment there. Yeah. So brain fog could be an experience of feeling as though your cognition isn't working properly because of an idea you have of how it's supposed to work. I don't know that would ever actually be possible, because without having an experience of what the different cognition is like, just a concept of what that very different way of cognition operating is like, it would be hard to compare what you're experiencing against it. It's the old fish in the water joke that I'm sure I've said a bunch of times. The two young fish are swimming along, an older fish comes past and says, "Hey kids, how's the water treating you today?" And as they go their separate ways, one young fish turns to the other and says, "What's water?" That until you have an experience that is different, you can't really clarify that the experience you're having is an experience at all. It's just what life is. I don't know. This is the most ridiculous example that just popped into my head. Imagine that for some reason, some way, somehow, your nose could just start shifting around your face, right? Whatever that felt like, it would immediately become clear to you when it's not happening after the first time it does happen. But until something like that happens, I don't notice that my nose isn't moving. It just is a nose. A more practical, like real life. I like to use more ridiculous examples to draw attention to the thing and grapple with the idea first and then connect it back to something you might have actually experienced. So more like practical real world experience of something like that. And I totally just forgot what was I going to say about you don't know it until something else happens. Dang, I had a very common example of that and I totally lost track of it. Oh well. Excuse me. Actually, that's a whole nother thing we could talk about, is talk about how experiences shift your perception, meaning that you can be happy with something until you have a concept about another possibility. And if that other possibility is better than what you're experiencing, even if you're still happy with what you're experiencing, you're less happy with it. And vice versa. If you become aware of more experiences that are even worse than what you've known about, then you're going to feel better about whatever your experience is. There's a reason that people will say things like, well, I have it better than those poor people who, whatever, fill in the blank. Becoming aware, reminding ourselves in that moment, being aware of the fact that there are much worse options than what you're experiencing makes your experience feel better. And flip, if you start thinking all the time about like, man, what must it be like for those people who have this great thing and that great thing, then your experiences are going to feel worse. It's one of the reasons that I don't like, for example, talking about neurotypical people as though they actually exist, because it makes your own experience worse. You're creating a concept of somebody who doesn't struggle with things that you struggle with, which means that your struggles now subjectively feel worse. Anyway, that's off topic, I suppose. So I'm going to just share my theory of brain fog because this is what I came up with that helped me a couple years ago. And since then, I've been testing it with clients or friends or whomever when people are telling me about brain fog. And it's been useful every time I've tested it. Does that mean that it is correct? Not at all. It could be something else completely that was useful and not this thing, but I'm going to share it anyway. I kind of am just going to indulge my wanting to talk about philosophy and stuff. So it's about resource expenditure. It's a particular type of resource expenditure that you're paying attention to a particular kind of a thing. This is the theory. I'm going to stop saying it's a theory. Well, I probably won't, but I'll try to stop saying it's a theory because I'm setting this all up. This is just what we're making up. It's not definitive. That attention is going to a particular thing to an extent that is unpleasant for one reason or another. Specifically, I can skip to that, I guess, but I don't know if it'll make as much sense as it would make after I talk through some of the underlying stuff a little bit more. But effectively, it is paying attention to yourself, specifically monitoring yourself and monitoring yourself, monitor yourself and monitoring yourself, monitor yourself, monitor yourself. Because there is something happening that you don't like and you're trying to figure out why, and you think the why is about you. So you're trying to figure it out conceptually. We'll build up to that. Why is everything I experience so different from literally anyone or anything I've ever heard? And then you get labels for it later on. Yeah. Well, in that specific case, not specific case, when that happens, it's in part because the label not only gives you a different way of interacting with it, observing it, it's because the label gives you a sense of community. Even if you don't feel like you're belonging with other people, the fact that the label exists and matches your experience tells you right away, hey, you're not the only one. You're not insane. You're not making this up. Other people have experienced this, or there wouldn't be a word for it. And again, even if you're not using the language with anybody else or joining community or building relationships, when we're using language internally, it's always in reference to how would we describe it to somebody else. That's what language is for, right? There's a reason that you didn't have that language. You had the experiences, but not the language. And then when you get the language later and it maps to those things, somebody gave you that language, which means you have it in the context of this is, honestly, my fun way of thinking of it in my head, it's zip files. Language is being able to zip. I don't even know what that process actually is in terms of like computer programs, but it's data compression. It's here's this very complex experience with all these different variables going on, but I'm identifying which elements of that are the ones that matter, and then kind of compressing it down into language that carries just the parts that I think matter. And when the other person hears it, they've got to reopen it, unzip the file. They've got to expand it, the data back out, but it only carries the specific parts that you put in it. So in order to expand it back out, it's a combination of making up whatever seems to fit for those missing pieces in the context, because I didn't identify those as being necessary, right? If I say fire, then I'm saying that the concept of fire is important. The size, the location, the type, whatever, all that stuff doesn't matter. You can imagine what you want. And sometimes I'm correct about that and it doesn't cause us a problem. And other times I assume when I say fire, you're going to unpack it the way that I would, which is to think, oh, a campfire or a fire in a fireplace. But you actually thought about a candle, or you thought about somebody being terminated from their job or whatever. So language is just a container for an experience, but we have to drop a lot of the specific nuances of the experience to be able to get it down into language. This is part of why talking about things can be so helpful, or journaling about things can be so helpful. The act of putting something into language, and I should be clear here that when I say language, I'm using the word a little bit differently than its actual definition. I'm using it to talk about symbolic representation. When I am deliberately attaching a meaning to a sign that sign does not inherently contain. Meaning, if I say, for example, moo or whatever, that was a terrible, I can do a really good cow impression, but I felt embarrassed about doing it. So then I backed off it, and it was this weird, like, half attempt. I didn't just say moo. Anyway, I can make that sound, and that might connect to a cow for you. Well, that has inherent meaning because cows make that sound if you've experienced, hearing that sound and seeing a cow. But the word cow does not have an inherent connection to the thing that we call a cow. It's just a series of sounds. So when I say language, it's a shorthand way of saying any sign or symbol that you have deliberately connected meaning to. Mostly when we use the word language, we're talking about a shared set of sign and symbols that we have all more or less connected some similar meanings to. It's important to note that it's not the same, and it can't be. The only exception to this that I know of is math. Math is the only language I'm aware of, and I'm not aware of a ton, that uses stipulated definitions where we can definitively say, if you say something is the average of something, we can definitively say that that is correct usage of the word or incorrect usage of the word, as opposed to English or any spoken language or sign language or hieroglyphics or art or whatever other symbolic means of conveying things, where there's a lot more flexibility, and we can't definitively say this means this. Fire means that to me, but it might mean something to somebody else, right? Like, language is a living thing. Fire also is a slang term for, I'm going to reveal my ignorance here, but for something being like really great, basically. If you say something is fire, that means like this thing is amazing, it's hot, it's fire, right? If we say spitting fire, if we say we were fired upon, like, the word means all kinds of different things. Way off track there, but that's what I said. When you guys say things and it shapes what I'm doing. So getting the language is really helpful because it allows you to start to identify pieces of the experience that other people seem to have identified as being meaningful. Like your actual experience of, for example, anhedonia is a word that you're using there. Anhedonia is a word that means loss of interest in things that usually hold interest for you, basically. The word is constructed. I love etymology. I'm streaming right now. Sorry, one of the staff therapists knocking on the door. Comes from hedonic, hedonism, and is a prefix meaning the absence of. Ia at the end just turns it into a noun. It means the experience of not finding pleasure in pleasurable things. So by naming that experience, that thing, we've now signified to you what about that experience is important. Even though your specific experience that you're labeling anhedonia carries a lot more than just the vague concept of loss of interest in interesting things that typically interest you. We've clarified that what matters about it is the loss of interest part. So that's the part that gets remembered and conveyed. We're way off of brain fog, but maybe that's okay. I don't know. Maybe people want to talk about brain fog and maybe not. I kind of want to do some stuff about language and memory now, but maybe that's just more because I enjoy that stuff. Let's go back to brain fog because it is coming up a lot. So the theory here is that what you're doing is using cognition to solve a task, which is great. We do it all the time. Sometimes you can literally solve a problem just by thinking, because a problem is not always necessarily about the material conditions of a thing that exists physically in the environment. Oftentimes the problem is how you're perceiving it, or how you're responding to it, or what significance you're attaching to it. And things like that we can change just purely cognitively, just by thinking, reframing something. That if I, for example, think that seeing a raven is a bad omen, and so I see a raven and now I'm feeling anxious and distressed, that without doing anything to interact with the raven or anything else in my environment, if I can, and it's very difficult to do this without actually referencing other people, which is in the environment, but it is possible. We do it all the time. if I can, in my head, rework that and say, no, I don't think that seeing that raven meant anything about something bad coming, then the anxiety can go away. And the anxiety was the problem. Seeing the raven wasn't the problem. The raven's gone. It's not doing anything to me. But my ideas about it are what's causing the problem. So we can cognitively solve problems without doing anything. More than that, we can cognitively come up with solutions that require us to do something to enact those solutions. We'll still have to actually interact with something in the environment to make the problem go away, but we come up with an idea of how to go about doing that. What is this new thing that I'm not, okay, I don't like this. What can I do? I could try this. No, I don't think so. What about this? Yeah, maybe, blah, blah, blah. We're running scenarios. So it does help. It does work. And sometimes it doesn't. We were actually talking about this in terms of anxiety at the presentation last night, because anxiety is another version of, it's another kind of thing that can happen when you are trying to solve a problem cognitively. And in fact, anxiety and brain fog probably go really hand in hand. Anyway, Douglas Hofstadter, whose books I've never read, but I intend to, just like all the other books I intend to read. But I'm vaguely familiar with the concepts contained in those books. I'm saying all that partly to model and be honest and show that when people talk about things, very rarely have they checked all the reference material in great detail. Even if we do read the book, we don't remember every element of the book. We just remember our interpretation and our responses. Anyway, his theory of consciousness is talking about that we are two systems, where our body, and the body responds to the environment, interacts with physical reality. And then we are also, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, a separate system. Doesn't mean necessarily body and spirit. It just means, our body contains many systems, right? The cardiovascular system and the nervous system. It just means that there are things that can interact one with the other, but that one can be changed without the other also being changed, right? They can be separated theoretically. The idea there is that what we're doing is our body is behaving, interacting, and consciously we're observing that. So we're observing what we're doing. We're observing what we're experiencing. There's a concept called metacognition, which any of you who've done much work in executive functioning stuff are probably pretty familiar with, or therapy or whatever. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. So first we can observe our body, what we're doing, what we're feeling, but then we can also observe our thoughts, and we can have responses to that too. Oh, I'm sad. I wonder why I'm sad. That's metacognition now. And we can build up and build up. I can observe that. Okay, I'm sad. I wonder why I'm sad. Oh, dang it. I'm wondering why I'm sad again. I keep doing that. Why do I keep doing that? Well, now I feel like I've gone really off the rails. Why do I keep falling? And we can go up and up and up and up and just observe ourselves. Blah, 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 blah. My theory that I'm presenting to you guys right now about what brain fog is, what that experience is, I have literally never heard. I've heard lots of people talk about brain fog or some other word for the experience. I've never heard anybody talk about it without immediately following it by saying something like, and I don't know why it's happening. I'm feeling foggy and I'm not sure why. Or I'm feeling foggy and I think it might be because of blah, blah, blah. In that case, we've come up with some theories, but we're not saying it definitively. We're still implying, I'm not sure why. I have some ideas, but I'm not sure why. I think brain fog is an experience that happens when we observe something internal, some cognitive experience. We don't like what we see, and we're trying to come up with an explanation for why it is happening without referencing anything other than our own thoughts and memories. Doesn't mean that we can't come up with theories that involve physicality. We might say, maybe I'm feeling foggy because I'm hungry. But I'm thinking that conceptually, not feeling a sense of hunger right then and there in that moment. I'm thinking, well, it's been a while since I've eaten. Or maybe I'm feeling foggy because I didn't sleep well last night. That's a physical thing that happened, but it's not here right now. I'm still thinking about it, remembering it, coming up with my ideas. We do that because it works. just as a general rule, anything you do that doesn't work, anything you do that causes problems for you, if you do it continuously or repeatedly, if it's more than once or twice or three times or whatever, it's because you do it a lot and it mostly works. We humans, our brains adapt really, really quickly. It's honestly fascinating to me. Research studies where they'll put goggles onto people that reverse images. So everything they're looking at is now upside down. And at first, when that happens, you're completely disoriented. You lose track of your body. People can't complete tasks. It's difficult. But within 10 to 15 minutes, they adapt and then can navigate the environment pretty much just as fluidly as before. Our brains are really fast at changing. It's awesome. So if I'm doing something, if I am actively something I'm doing, thinking, feeling, experiencing, whatever, it originates in me and it causes me a problem, it must either be new, be something I'm not realizing causes me a problem, contributes to the problem that I'm experiencing, or it must be something that works for me a lot. There are reasons that there are stereotypes about things like the neurotic intellectual, or the what's the word I'm looking for? Absent-minded professor. Well, I guess I'm enacting that one a little bit right now. You and Patrick Rothfuss have given me exponentially more vocab. Well, that's good company to keep. Whatever, I'm just having fun today. I don't know. I was planning on answering these questions and it didn't happen, so I'm just going wherever. Another little fun theory of mine is that what we mostly call intelligence, this stuff that enables people to succeed on academic, intellectual tasks, the kind of stuff that we look at as patterns and say, oh, wow, they're really smart, I really think has more to do with vocabulary than anything else. The more words you know, and there's a lot to that. It's not just a simple knowing words makes you sound smart. It's about what you're able to perceive. It's about how you are able to look at things from other people's perspective and therefore see things from different angles, different possibilities. If all you know is your own experience, how are you going to come up with a new and different idea? You have to be able to reference whether or not it's actually other people's ways of perceiving or experiencing or whatever, or just your idea of how they might. But you have to come up with that idea some way, somehow. And then ideas can build on themselves, but it all originates in that, being aware of the fact that you're different from other people. Really, man, I'm just getting off on all kinds of things today. Getting distracted by all kinds of things. I just realized getting off on all kinds of things could sound a lot worse. Yeah, everybody is different, but not everybody is as aware of the fact that they're different. If you are aware of the fact that you're different, it means that you have observed other people's experiences, maybe accurately, maybe not, maybe you're wrong, or maybe they've told you something that doesn't actually end up being true or doesn't match their experience. But regardless, you have to have some concept of what other people's experiences are in order to be able to be aware that your experience is different. And a lot of the time that originates in seeing two other people and realizing that they're different one from the other, and then extrapolating onto, well, then I must be different too. Everybody knows that we're different to some extent. We're aware of it in different ways. And some people are more likely to say, nobody else is like me. That must be because I'm weird. And some people are more likely to say, nobody else is like me. That must be because they're all weird. It's just about where you center things. Anyway. So brain fog. Layers on layers on layers. You're trying to track 7 different threads of things. There's a reason people will talk about when they're saying brain fog, it's not that I'm not thinking. It's not that I'm not thinking clearly. It's more that I have so many thoughts jumbled up and bumping into each other. It's almost like I can't get to the end of one thought before another thought interrupts it. And then I'm thinking about the new thought that interrupted it. But now I'm thinking about the fact that a thought interrupted another thought and blah, blah, blah. For whatever reason, you have encountered a problem, something that you don't like, that you have identified as, I should solve this by thinking about it. And then you try. And at first it feels good because usually you do solve it by thinking about it. More often than not, by a good margin, when you try a specific strategy, it works. Otherwise, you get rid of that strategy. So if you're thinking about a problem, it's because thinking about problems usually works for you. So it feels good. Okay, I'm tackling this. But then at a certain point, if it hasn't been resolved, if it hasn't worked, it starts to feel bad. Cool. All right, here's this new problem. Let me figure it out. Oh, wait. Why is this taking me so long? And then we start brain fog. So that's why I was saying earlier, could it be that you always experience it that way? Yeah, theoretically, because if you're just thinking, why am I doing this? Because you have a sense that other people do it differently, but in reality, that would be very hard to actually observe. Instead, it's more likely that it is different from your usual experience. Usually when I think about something, it goes this way, and now it's going worse. So by definition, that experience is my cognition isn't working the way that I think that it should work. And then when that happens, that's terrifying, by the way. If you drink alcohol and you notice that your cognition is changing, the way that you think is changing, thoughts become slippery, or however you want to describe it, right? You're not usually very distressed because you can say, yeah, it's happening because I'm drinking alcohol. I know I'm drinking alcohol. I went into this with the idea that it would affect my cognition. So the fact, the experience itself of the cognition changing doesn't cause me any stress. But imagine if all of a sudden you started to feel drunk and you weren't drinking alcohol. The exact same experience, but absent the clear-cut reason for it. You would probably panic. I mean, I certainly would. Like, what the hell is going on? Why am I feeling like this? What's happening? And there we go. Now we've started brain fog. Some internal experience has happened that I don't like it. It's a problem. It's worse than I would want it to be. So quickly, I want to say, okay, why is this happening? Just so I can make sure it's not like me dying, or so that I can address it or understand what happened so I can control it the next time more, or whatever. If we have an answer there, oh, because I'm drinking. This is what drinking does to me. Interesting. Okay, let me have another drink and see what happens. Or, because I'm hungry. That's why I'm getting irritable like this. Or I'm tired, or, anything that can be directly, immediately observed. Branching out from there, yeah, we can get to things like, I think I'm feeling like this or thinking like this because I didn't sleep well last night. Even if we're not actually aware of the tiredness, that can still work. We can still say, yeah, that's definitely it. I'm exhausted. And now we're done thinking about it. Again, remember, sometimes thinking about it resolves the problem in and of itself. Sometimes it gives us an idea of something that we'll have to do later on in order to resolve the problem. Yeah, I'm tired. Whew. You know what? I'll go to bed early tonight. Meaning, I don't like feeling this way. So I started thinking about why it was happening, found an answer, may or may not be a useful answer, but I found an answer that seems right to me because I didn't sleep well enough. And now I have cognitively come up with a plan of action. Later on, I might go to sleep early. I might not. If I do, and the next day I don't feel foggy, great. Now I have created a correlation for myself. The next time I feel foggy, I'm going to say, oh yeah, it's tired. And in fact, a lot of the time, people who don't have terms like brain fog and, feeling fuzzy, feeling whatever, people who don't pay as much attention to their own experience of cognition and whatever, their answer, their explanation, their term for this experience is just tired. I'm just tired, I'm drained, can't focus. I'm frazzled. I'm scattered. I feel like I'm all over the place. I don't know what's going on with me today. It happens to all of us all the time. So the correlation that I've noticed that seems to be useful is effectively, we can boil it down to this. If you don't like something you're observing internally, some experience that you are observing, you're not theorizing or creating a cause and effect relationship. You're just saying, oh, I'm noticing this happen and I don't like it, and it's internal. And then you say, why is this happening? and you don't come up with a good answer that you believe right away, pretty quickly you're going to start to feel bad about the fact that you didn't answer it quickly. Thinking about a problem feels good until it feels bad. And it feels bad until it no longer feels bad because you solved it, or at least feel as though you've solved it. In other words, okay, I'm tired. Why am I so tired? Oh, because I didn't sleep. Great. Why am I so tired? I slept well. I haven't worked out today. I drank the caffeine I normally drink. Oh, what am I missing? Why am I feel like I'm too tired to even figure this out. So it starts to go bad. And it sometimes works that as we push through that experience and keep going, I don't know what, and then we do come up with, I wonder if it's because I'm driving this car and there are 3 other people in here and they're all asleep, and somehow I'm just picking up on that sleepy energy. Maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not. But if you believe it, I'm using that example because I do think that myself sometimes. If you believe it, then you'll say, okay, cool. And now I can stop thinking about it. I might use it to solve the problem, wake somebody up and see if that changes anything. I might not, but at least I'm done thinking about it. So it feels good to think about a problem until it feels bad to think about a problem. And then it feels bad until you get interrupted, or until it feels good because you've solved it. And again, that probably happens sometimes. Otherwise, your brain would not push past a certain point. If thinking about a problem only worked within the first, let's say 2 minutes, and after 2 minutes, you never, ever, ever had an experience of thinking about it more actually pays off, you'd probably pretty quickly stop thinking about things after 2 minutes. I'm making a lot of connections, but I'm just going to not say them out loud and let them be implied, and people can draw their own connections about different people and different experiences and how much we think about things or don't think about things and why. But one thing that I can say is, if you get feedback from people telling you that the problems you're experiencing are sourced in you, that the reason the problem is a problem is because of something you thought or didn't think or did or didn't do. Nothing about the context, the environment, anybody else, anything else. Is all in you. Well, that incentivizes you to pay more attention to what's going on with you. That when you come up with a problem, come against another problem later, you're going to say, well, a lot of the time, most of the time, all the time, when I have a problem, people point out it's because of something I'm doing or thinking. So this one must be the same. So what is it? Let me get in there and start thinking about it. I use a metaphor for this of, I don't know if it's a metaphor, I don't know. But there's an old episode of the Star Trek original series, which I've never watched. I'm just referencing a lot of things that I know about but haven't actually observed myself, where the ship computer turns evil for some reason. And because the computer runs everything on the ship, it's monitoring the crew and they can't really do anything. It's locking them out of stuff. So they need to distract it. And Spock says, computer, calculate pi to the final digit, which is an impossible task because pi is an irrational number. There is no final digit, which means that even this ship computer, this supercomputer, futuristic sci-fi, helps things travel 9 times the speed of light or whatever. Actually, I think they max out at warp 8 times the speed of light. I don't even really watch Star Trek. I don't know why I know that. That's not true. I do know why I know that. It's just not worth going down that path. It's going to try to dedicate whatever amount of its resources are necessary to solve the problem. When that doesn't work, it dedicates more resources. When that doesn't work, it dedicates more resources until it's everything. It's an impossible problem. It's probably calculating trillions and trillions and trillions of digits per millisecond, but it doesn't matter because it can generate infinite digits in pi and never be done. So it consumes everything. And then they can get away with, getting through doors and whatever, because they can't pay attention to them anymore. To me, that really is a very resonant experience, or that really resonates with my experience of brain fog or anxiety, different things that happen in different ways, but are different versions of, I'm thinking about something and it's not working. So I'm going to think more And it's still not working. All right, I better think even more, and it's still not working. Okay, fine. I can't think about anything else. I'm only thinking about this. I'm going to obsess over it. Even flashbacks are a version of this. The thing that I'm thinking about, my brain has identified as so important to think about, spend all of my resources on so that there's nothing left over to even be aware of anything in the present moment, you know? So if you are experiencing something internally, you observe it, you don't like it, and you can't come up with an answer for why it's happening, you're going to get into brain fog. I like to test this theory by calling people's attention to things outside of themselves, to the environment. And it usually, well, I was going to say it doesn't work if blah, 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 but I haven't actually, I think it wouldn't work if blah, blah, blah. So I don't do it that way, but maybe it would. I think it wouldn't work if I'm being clear about that what I'm trying to do is in order to reduce their experience of brain fog. Because if that's the context, right? If I'm like, hey, look at this thing here, because that'll get you out of your head and now your brain fog will be less. Well, if that's the case, then I've got to monitor my brain fog as I'm looking at it and saying, is it going down? Is it going up? I don't know. Okay. I'm not sure. It continues it. It makes it worse. We have to pull it out for reasons unrelated to the brain fog itself, at least at first. Find something in the environment. And yes, this same kind of strategy works for things like anxiety. Anything where you're getting overwhelmed in here, paying attention to the environment will decrease the resources available for this. Even things like stimming and fidgeting, which we know are self-regulation techniques, but we don't really talk much, at least not that I've seen. I don't see people theorizing about the mechanism of why those things help self-regulate. This is why I think it helps, because it's pulling resources to this. And this isn't a problem, so it doesn't contribute to my distress. It doesn't feel urgent and pull anything away from this that I feel like must be spent on this. Just anything that I can spare. And I have obviously, it's an observed thing, but I have a sensitivity to certain types of tactile data, right? So that even though it's not a problem, even though it's not novel, I'm still aware of it anyway. I'm still spending energy moving my fingers. So that means that there's less available for this, which decreases the intensity of this experience, whatever it is. And sometimes I hate that, by the way. We all do, right? Sometimes I love what's going on in here. And I don't just mean like, broad conceptual, whatever things. Sometimes it's just like love, right? A conceptual thing. Like, wow, I'm really experiencing love right now. And then in that case, I'm probably not fidgeting unless the experience of that gets so intense that I kind of need to fidget or stim or whatever to decrease that intensity. It's why we see stimming, especially even in cases of intense good emotions, people getting excited and happy. This is all my theories again. Not that nobody else has ever said this. I just don't know if anybody else has said things like this or not. Which I immediately then got into, all right, well, I don't want it to sound like I'm trying to claim credit for something that other people might already know about. But then when I say that, maybe it sounds like I am trying to claim credit. So let me clarify that no, what I'm trying to do is be clear that I hope this is useful. I hope it's helpful. I have found it to be valuable and therefore worth sharing. But just to be clear that if it's not helpful for you, it's not helpful. It's just something I'm making up. I don't know. Certainly, if it conflicts with something that you know or have experienced that's helpful, keep the thing that you know and reject this. This is just something I'm making up. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down that path. It's part of the reason that I don't like doing this stream by myself nearly as much as I like doing it with other people or with people in the chat to talk to, because I am now referencing everything conceptually. My own experience, my ideas of people who might be watching this. I know that many more people watch this than that talk in the chat, sometimes more, sometimes fewer, but there's always more people watching than chatting. So I have to create mental images of what they're like and what they might be thinking. You've already seen me a couple times today say something and then immediately after say, ooh, I realized that could be interpreted in this way. So let me clarify, because I'm referencing these mental models, but it's all up here as opposed to I like that you're here. Thank you. As opposed to being able to reference, right? To see somebody's face and get a sense of, oh, they seem confused, or oh, they seem appreciative, or oh, they seem to think that I'm being ridiculous, or whoa, they reacted to that as though I said something terrible. What could I have? Oh, I see. I didn't realize it could be interpreted that way, but yeah, absolutely, it could be interpreted to be that terrible thing. I better clarify. Part of the reason I think that I'm hearing a lot more about brain fog lately is because of isolation. Specifically because many people are moving forward very quickly with being less isolated, whereas many people are not. Meaning, if you're in the same environments and with the same people more frequently, who you are, how you behave, how you think, how you communicate is more shaped by those environments and those people, which means you get better and better and better at navigating and getting what you want out of those environments, those people, those situations. Also means that when you go into other different environments and different people and different situations, that is going to be more stressful, because by comparison, like we talked earlier, right? Once you become aware of, oh, it could be this. Well, now this, even though it's fine, feels kind of lousy. This might have used to been the best I could do or the best I'd experienced, and I thought it was great. But now it's shifted down because I know it could be that much better. We become more suited to these things. So one of the things that's happening there is as people become less isolated, they're experiencing more in different situations, and it's a little bit harder than it was. They're a little bit slower to respond. It doesn't go quite as easily. They have to put more effort into it as compared to 2 years ago before the pandemic started, and most everyone experienced some increased level of isolation over the past 2 years to some extent. That's one. Another is that feeling of difference. If I am staying isolated, which my family and I have 2 children under 5, I'm a big believer in vaccines and being cautious. I'm aware that many people are isolating less, and I still am. And maybe that makes me angry at them. Maybe but I'm aware of a difference. And maybe it makes me think that, am I missing something? Because everybody else seems to be behaving in such and such a way, and I'm not. So what's going on with me? And that contributes to brain fog. And some of it is just, we have less reality checking. You and whoever you hang out with, whoever you spend time with, you have some things in common and some things different. Some of those things in common are great. Some of them are great and still cause problems because we're so in sync on this thing. We engage on this thing so much that we're not as aware of these other options and other possibilities. And as we become less aware of those other possibilities, it feels like being dumber, referencing the vocab thing from earlier and being able to reference other people. All my D&D people like playing without cameras when we're online. I hate it so much. Yeah. I call my normal operating standard brain fog, because if this is how life is supposed to work, I don't know how anything gets done ever. Ooh, we only got 6 minutes left because I wanted to go talk about that now. Well, let's do this quickly. All right, a metaphor that I started trying to write, but writing metaphors is terrible for me because then I just want to go off on every little thing. Oh, wait. Okay, hold on. Brain fog. Let's at least wrap this up a little bit. So if you're experiencing it, then you want to get your attention into the environment. And there's various ways to do that. A lot of that is, I'm laughing at the chat there. A lot of that is same kind of stuff that you would do for anxiety or whatever other kind of thing. Look for things that are interesting, things that require physical, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to do it cognitively, this is the only cognitive solution that I have found. This is why I came up with this theory. It's why this theory helped me, because it was 5 or 6 months of not every day. And it started when I started taking ADHD medication. So at first there was a lot of thinking about, is it the medication affecting me this way? But what also happened when I started taking ADHD medication is I started paying a lot more attention to what my cognitive experience was like, because I was trying to assess the effectiveness of the meds. So I was paying a lot of attention inside. Why this? Why that? I wonder if it's this. I wonder if it's that. And I would test theories and they weren't working. So then I'd be back to what am I missing? And the only thing that ended up helping me was developing this theory, and specifically the thought, when I am thinking these things, why am I blank? Why am I blank? That I have to say to myself, asking that question is what's causing the brain fog. Trying to assess the brain fog is what's causing the brain fog. For me, that works. It might work for you, it might not. For me, it makes it so that when it starts to happen, I catch it now. I say, not just brain fog, but anxiety, all these different things. Oh, I'm starting to get in my head. And I have lots of exercises that I've developed and shared with people about being able to monitor and observe as that starts earlier and earlier and earlier, so that you can address it when it's easier to address. Rather than, it's kind of like if you don't notice your hunger very much, if it's not a very high priority for whatever reason, then by the time you do notice it, it's bad. That's the same for anything. If you don't notice your emotions very much, then by the time you do notice them, they're really intense and good or bad, but more often you're going to notice it when they're bad. That something annoys me slightly, and it's not worth dealing with. Something else annoys me slightly, okay, but I'm just being ridiculous. I shouldn't actually do anything about something else, until finally I'm like, you son of, this is the, by the time I do anything about it, it's bad. And that's what's happening with the brain fog. By the time you notice it, it's bad. And because it's a cognitive thing, it being bad means that your cognition isn't working the way that it usually does anymore. So it's an accurate perception of yourself, but then you keep trying to solve it cognitively anyway. Honestly, in a sense, it's like trying to resolve a sense of hunger by fasting. It's like trying to, become more rested, resolve a feeling of tiredness by working very hard. The thing that you're doing to try and solve the problem actually makes it worse, and it escalates. Now, things will happen that call your attention to the environment completely outside of your control. Nobody can stay in their head forever. That's not possible. The physicality of our bodies and our environment requires that from time to time, something's going to happen. I get hungry, if nothing else, that requires me to pay back attention. So it comes and goes, and it feels as though it's coming and going randomly, which just makes the problem worse, because it's like, why is this happening randomly? I thought it might be this, but it doesn't seem to be that. There are patterns and correlations there, but we're missing it because we're over-focusing on the cognition and blah, blah, blah. What was I going to say? Oh, this is how life is supposed to work. I don't know how to think this done. All right. This is a good challenge for me because I was writing this metaphor way too long. Because there's a lot of debate about when it comes to depression or, whatever experiences that get diagnosed through the DSM or whatever. Some people are very insistent on biology as the either sole cause or primary cause of those experiences. Some people are resistant to the idea that biology impacts it at all, that it's just purely choice and you're doing it to yourself by thinking or caring about the wrong things or whatever. And of course, I think the truth is a combination of all things and other things, So here is the metaphor I came up with to try and explain this. And it's a good challenge to do it in, let's give it 2 minutes. Imagine that you take your shovel and you try to dig through concrete with it. Because for whatever reason, you believe that you should be able to. Maybe because you think other people do. Maybe because, hey, the concrete needs to be dealt with and the only tool I have is a shovel, so I got to try, As long as you believe that it should work, you'll keep trying. And you'll keep trying until you are no longer capable of continuing to try. Meaning that you hurt yourself or you broke your shovel or both. And if and when that happens, and then later you're going to somebody and saying, hey, I got hurt or my shovel, I don't know what's going on, but I was trying to use my shovel. Something happened and I got hurt. Can you help me out? And they'll take a look at the shovel and say, well, the shovel's damaged. No wonder you got hurt using this thing. It's broken. You shouldn't use this until it's fixed. So let's fix it up for you. And then you should be okay. So they fix the shovel and then you heal up over some time and the concrete is still there. And you still have the shovel, and so you try again because still you have no reason to think that it won't work. Nobody told you. because they just assumed that when you said you were using your shovel, you were using it for something a shovel is meant to do. Why would I assume that you're doing something like using a shovel to dig through concrete? I think that is to me, that's a good and helpful way to look at biology versus beliefs and behaviors and whatever. It's, yeah, the shovel is damaged. Your body, your brain, your physicality, it is damaged. But did the problem happen because you were using a damaged tool, or did the tool get damaged because of what you were trying to do with it? In other words, people will fight over, oh yeah, you got hurt because your shovel is broken. You're not doing anything wrong. It's not that you're too weak to use it or you don't know how to use a shovel. It's just that you have a bad shovel. And other people will say, no, your shovel is fine. I use a shovel all the time. We all use shovels and we don't get hurt. If you're getting hurt using the shovel, it's because you're doing it wrong. You're too weak to use it. You're too inexperienced. You're too dumb, whatever. And we fight over all of that stuff. But we completely lose track of the concrete. Because you didn't think, for whatever reason, you thought it was something that should work, or you wouldn't have tried it. Since you thought it should work, you didn't think it was notable to point out to somebody else when talking about the problem, hey, by the way, like if you're experiencing a problem with your car, would you think to say, like, just so you know, what I was doing with the car was trying to drive it? Like, no, of course, that's what I was trying to do. It's assumed, right? And even if I might think that maybe you are trying to do something with the shovel that you shouldn't be, why would I say it? I'd be so worried about offending or insulting you by being, are you sure you're using this right? Anyway, so yeah, the body, the brain, whatever, the biology is off of what we would want it to be, but we don't know why. It's chicken and the egg. And the concrete is the part that matters. So you're saying, how does anything get done? If this is how it's supposed to work, how does anything get done ever? Because our brains and our bodies are tools that even when they're functioning exactly as they are supposed to, as they're intended, they're doing what they're supposed to do. If we try to use them to do things that they're not meant to do, we can still get hurt and damage the tool. We get hurt, we damage the tool, and we fail to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish anyway. And there are lots of reasons that people try and dig through the concrete with a shovel. You get stuck in situations sometimes outside of your control where you got to get that concrete gone and all you've got is the shovel. And so you try. There's lots and lots of different reasons that it can happen. So it's not about why. It's just about the fact. A very common example of this, we are not evolved to live alone. Our brains and bodies were not ever intended for that purpose. Doesn't mean we can't do it. It means that it's tricky. And we weren't intended to live with only one other person or two or three. For those of you who are parents, we were not evolved to parent two people. Two people are doing the parenting for any number of children. We were evolved in community. Our brains and bodies evolved. The vast majority of the history of human evolution took place in an environment in which you slept in a tiny little whatever it was. You didn't hang out in there. You slept in there, maybe kept some things in there, did some stuff in there. But most of your life was spent in a communal space with other people every day. I'm not saying that is awesome and we should all do that. There's reasons that we've done the things that we've done, but just it's good to remember from time to time, oh, right, the tool I'm using was not built for this. Doesn't mean it can't work, and maybe it's even better for whatever reason, but it was not built for this. I like that part of the metaphor. Why are you using a shovel to dig this concrete? Because I need to dig the concrete. That's a great one, especially when talking about mental health or whatever people are calling it, right? Why do you keep thinking about, just stop thinking about whatever's making you anxious. Why are you thinking about it? Because I have to think about it, because it's there. Anyway, I did not do a good job with my challenge. We're 5 minutes over and I'm going to end this. I'll be back next week, same time, same place, hopefully talking about those questions about anxiety. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bast Insider, for being here and talking with me. I appreciate it. All right. Goodbye, everybody.